Hello, welcome back to Absinthe and Ink. I'm MJ, and in this video I'm going to talk about 10 random fun and interesting book facts and statistics that I found randomly while I was goofing around on the internet. And the first one I'm going to talk about is one that you're probably pretty familiar with. I know I am, and you've probably been called it, and that is bookworm. And while by today's standards to call someone a bookworm is paying them kind of an offhanded compliment or just having a little fun jest with somebody, that wasn't always the case. Now, the word bookworm first shows up in 1580 in some letters between a gentleman named Gilbert Harvey and the poet Edmund Spenser, who wrote The Faerie Queene. And in it, one of the gentlemen referred to someone as a morning bookworm, spelled Bookworme. Now, back then, that was considered an insult. A bookworm was somebody who you would kind of scorn as you would, well, a worm. They were found as somebody who you would have some contempt or disdain towards. And even in the 17th century, writer Ben Jonson wrote about someone he referred to as a whoreson bookworm. Now, while today if somebody calls you a bookworm, you may laugh at it and take it as a little bit of a compliment. But on the other hand, if they called you a whoreson, probably not so much. The second thing on this list is, well, how much the average person can read. So the average person reads about 200 to 250 words a minute, and that comes out to something like 40 to 50 pages an hour. Now, I wanted to find out what my average was, and there's a few websites that you can go check out where you read a small blurb of something and then you take a little test after that. And the average person, after they read this, usually retains about 60% of what they've read. So I went ahead and took those tests myself, and it turns out that I read about 260 words a minute and retained about 80%. Now, the reason that my numbers came out a little bit higher is probably because I spent years and years during my university years studying for my English degree, doing exactly that, reading a bunch of stuff in a very short time and then having to write a 25-page paper on it. Now, if you asked me to write a 25-page paper on something that I read in college, if you asked me to write a paper today, I probably couldn't do it unless I went ahead and reread that material. So I think the retention rate is probably based on a foundation of time, not to mention also interest. The more interested you are in something, the more likely you are going to retain it. Unless, of course, you're Bill Gates, who apparently reads 150 pages an hour and retains 90%. Now, of course, all that reading probably makes you wonder who has been writing the most books. Who are the most prolific writers? Well, you have R.L. Stine coming in at 450 published works, and you have Isaac Asimov coming in at 500 published works. But that's child's play compared to people like Barbara Cartland, who published 723 books, and Enid Mary Blyton, who published 800 books. And then you have Ryoki Inoue, a Japanese writer, who published 1,075. And after him, we have L. Ron Hubbard, who has published 1,084 books. But all these writers, they stand in the shadow of one woman, Spanish writer Corinne Theodo, who has written and published over 4,000 books. And of course, with all those books out there, you're probably going to want to know what the best-selling books were. Well, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to find out that the Bible is at number 1. And I don't think that the biggest selling series of all time is going to surprise you either, because that's Harry Potter. Now, some books that have sold over 100 million copies include Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, and Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien, and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. But if you're wondering what the #1 selling novel is, well, that's Don Quixote by Cervantes. And of course, knowing what the top selling books are made me interested in knowing what the least selling book of all time was. And that honor goes to the 1716 edition of the translation of the New Testament from Coptic into Latin by David Wilkins. Now, Mr. Wilkins had 500 copies of his book published by the Oxford University Press in 1716. And it took 191 years to sell all those books. That's an average of about about one book every 20 weeks. Now, I don't know if there's any of those original copies floating around anywhere, but I suspect if they are, they're probably worth a whole lot more now than when Mr. Wilkins wrote them. Now, what about the most expensive book ever sold? Well, that goes to the Codex Leicester, written by Leonardo da Vinci. And this is one of Da Vinci's notebooks that contains notes about science and art and the connection between them and illustrations. Now, this book is in a private library, or private collection rather, and it sold in 1994 for over $30 million. Now, in today's money, in 2025, that's about $64 million. And the owner of that book is Bill Gates. But surprisingly, Mr. Gates isn't the owner of the biggest library, even though he might have the most expensive book in his collection. The owner of the biggest personal library goes to John Q. Benham of Indiana. Mr. Benham has over 1.5 million books in his collection. Not only have they taken over his house, they've also are being stored in his 6-car garage, a separate 2-story building, and he even keeps some of them under a weatherproof tarp outside. And I thought my TBR was big. Now, if you've got a collection that big, you may be wondering, what is the most difficult book to read? And that is Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. Now, the reason I knew this already is because years ago, I thought that if I wanted to be well read, well, I was going to have to read some James Joyce. And so I picked up Finnegan's Wake. And after about 3 pages, I put it back down again. Because I knew that was not a book for me. And the second most difficult book is, well, also belongs to Mr. James Joyce. And that is Ulysses. Now, back in school, I had to read the monologue of Molly Bloom, who is Leopold Bloom's wife, Leopold Bloom being the main character. And after reading that, I knew that I had read enough of that book to know that I probably didn't really want to read the rest of it. Now, this doesn't mean that those are bad books. They're classics for a reason. They're just not my taste. Now, a lot of people don't read books because they're too busy trying to ban them. The most banned book, at least what I could find doing my research, appears to be George Orwell's 1984. Now, if you're wondering, well, what about the most banned books today? Well, I went on to Pen America, and they had a list of the most banned books for the 2023-2024 school year. And those books were tied for number 5, Crank by Ellen Hopkins, and 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. Those 2 books tied for 5th place. In 4th place was Sold by Patricia McCormick. In 3rd place was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. At number 2 is Looking for Alaska by John Green. And the number 1 book was 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult. Now, I've gone and I've read the synopsis of these books, and they all sound wonderful. So I'm going to be adding those to my collection. And I'm going to end with a book that, for a lot of readers, is our Achilles heel. And that book is Moby Dick. But if you're a little hesitant to read the original, you might be interested in the emoji copy. Yes, somebody spent some time putting together a copy of Moby Dick that's filled with emojis, and it's called Emoji Dick. Now, trying to say that title without giggling is almost near impossible, but it's not nearly as funny as some of the reviews that were left. Now, one person said that if it leads one kid to pick up some classics, then it's probably a good thing. Okay, that's a fair enough point. But not everybody agreed with that, because some other people stated that the whole idea of creating Moby Dick with emojis was astoundingly useless, and Emoji Dick doesn't sound very interesting. And if you think that I'm making this up, I'm going to put a link below to where you can actually go and read it online if you have absolutely nothing better to do in your life. So there you have it, just some random fun book facts and statistics. Now, if you have any fun facts or statistics that you want to share, please put them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. And I'll see you next time on Absinthe and Ink.